Have you ever played Jenga? If not, here's how it goes. You make a tower of blocks, then players take turns removing one block at a time. Progressively, this makes the tower unstable. It's a painfully slow process, but the outcome is both obvious and swift. The tower crashes. And this is what the population crisis looks like. Scientists call it a calamity in the making. Decades ago, it was a slow-moving force, but that's not the case anymore. The crisis has progressed. Now, the baby bust is happening quickly and widely. It is harming nearly every nation, and experts are bracing for a global population crash. Here's why. Fertility rate, or the number of births per woman, is falling across most nations. In 2017, global fertility rate stood at 2.5. 2017, 2.5. By 2021, it was down to 2.3. And now it is estimated to be 2.1. What is the ideal rate? 2.2. It's also called the replacement rate, the rate of births per woman, which keeps the population stable. That's the replacement rate. It should be 2.2. So fertility is dropping for women across all levels of education and income. In high-income nations, the situation has been bad for decades. Fertility fell below the replacement rate in the 1970s. But it's dropping in developing nations as well. And sometimes the decline does not scream crisis because it happens quietly. Take India, for instance. Last year, India surpassed China to become the most populous nation in the world, yet fertility is below replacement here. Or look at sub-Saharan Africa, which is home to countries like Zambia, Nigeria and Somalia. It was once resistant to the fertility crisis. It was predicted that by the year 2100, by the end of the century, the region would account for 1 in every 2 children born in the world. But that too is changing. People are increasingly using contraception. So this is a global trend. Demographers say by the end of the century, most nations will see a dramatic drop in their population and they will pay a huge economic price for it. Fewer people means lesser goods and services. So declining population means slower economic growth. Fewer people also consume less, meaning a population crisis in one nation could fuel an economic crisis in another. And China is an obvious example of this. Its population is declining rapidly. Last year, the number of people in China dropped by 2 million. And remember, China is the world's second largest economy. It plays a key role in driving global economic growth. If the baby bust worsens, there could be a shortage of factory workers there. It will further slow China's economic growth and raise costs for consumers outside China. This is a problem for nations that heavily depend on Chinese goods. Plus, Chinese consumers would spend lesser. This would be a problem for global brands. And this is a lesson for most superpowers like the US and Russia, who face a similar population crisis. A smaller population can diminish global clout, so countries are worried, or they should be. But what are they doing about it? They're throwing money at the problem. They're paying new parents, giving tax incentives and parental leave. Now, these are all expensive measures, but they've barely made a dent. Do you know why? Because governments are not listening to their people, especially the women.
I need to make time for taking care of my children, but the most difficult thing is that timing is not always guaranteed when you're working. So, I think the government and companies need to cooperate and create an environment so that parents can make and spend time for their children and have a good family.
It would be good if the government provided financial support, as women could face financial difficulties due to a career break after giving birth.
I think the government should reduce the pressure of raising children and give us more support. For example, they should invest more in education resources.
According to research, women delay childbirth for a number of reasons: abortion laws, unemployment, healthcare availability, housing costs, childcare costs, and burden of household labor. So they don't need a baby bonus. It may help some new mothers, but it won't solve their problems. Women can't make their own choices on marriage, work, and reproduction, yet the responsibility of child rearing and managing families is often thrust upon them. And remember, many of them have full-time jobs. No wonder women want out. It is obvious that governments have ignored basic research, they've ignored strategic measures that can boost birth rates. And by proxy, they have ignored women, the only people who can solve this crisis. And now they've manifested an economic ticking time bomb. What they fail to understand is that this is not a crisis of population, it's a crisis of ignorance.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. South Africa goes to the polls on the 29th of May. I will track the election and bring you ground reports. Is it the end of the road for the African National Congress? And will former President Jacob Zuma stage a dramatic comeback? From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.